Hello and welcome to The Word, bringing you the good news of Jesus Christ every day from the Order of Preachers around the world. Today we celebrate the feast of St. Thomas the Apostle, and from England we hear from Father Ewan Marley, prior of St. Michael's Priory, the Blackfriars in Cambridge. Father Ewan's preaching today is entitled Dying for Life.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. John. Thomas, one of the 12 called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Lest I see in his hands the mark of the nails, place my finger into the mark of the nails, place my hand into his side, I will never believe." 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen, yet have believed." The Gospel of the Lord. Thomas is famously doubting Thomas, and I've heard so many sermons on Thomas on this feast day about his intellectual doubt. I've heard sermons saying Thomas is reasonable. Didn't hear a sermon, but people remember one of our Dominicans, Father Herbert McCabe, who talked about Thomas as a believer rather than a doubter. But they all seem to assume that it's something to do with intellectual doubt. And I would wonder, because Thomas does occur quite a few times in the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John tells you a few things about the apostles. It almost looks like he's added some of the details that get missed out in the Synoptic Gospel, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Just a few more tidbits. But Thomas, I think, shows somebody whose unbelief is not intellectual at all. It's rather, in my mind, an attitude to death. So let's look at the earlier references to Tom in the Gospel of John. John chapter 11, verse 16. Now, this is the story about Lazarus dying, and Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." That's very strange. Let us go and die with him. It's almost like there's a preoccupation with death in Thomas. Like, we can't succeed, but we can die with Christ. And he's, I think, probably thinking more of the sort of martyrdom of the Maccabees who rose against the Greeks, the Greek general Antiochus, who died in battle. It certainly doesn't sound like someone who's a strong belief in the resurrection. And the whole passage, chapter 11, is about Lazarus, and where Christ says, "I am the resurrection." And then there's the next reference to Thomas, chapter 14, verse 5. Thomas said to him, "Lord, we do not know where you're going. How can we know the way?" That's in response to Christ saying, "You know the way." And Christ replies, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And then we're told that Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. Now, that itself is also a bit suspicious, because the reason that we're told the rest of the 12 are in the locked room is because they're afraid of the Jews. So why is Tom not there? Why is he wandering about? Does he want to die? I think maybe he does, After, in his mind, the failure of the mission, that Christ has died, and therefore, how can he be the Christ? Thomas doesn't hide. Thomas walks around the city. Might call that courage, might call that boldness, but some might call that a death wish. And that fits with, let us go there and die with him. Thomas's idea is sacrifice, which is something to be admired in some ways, but it's not the sacrifice of a true martyr. Famous quotation from Chesterton, can't quote it exactly, but He says the martyr and the suicide are not similar, but are exactly opposite. Suicide dies because they do not believe in life or value it. The martyr dies because they entirely give themselves to the value of life. Because the martyr believes in the resurrection, but the martyr dies because they want to live, but they will not let their life be constrained. This is me spreading what I think Chesterton means. Thomas doesn't see that at all. Thomas, I think, only sees death, doesn't see life. That's why it's interesting that he assumes that if Christ is risen, he will still have the marks of death in his body. Turns out to be right, of course. Christ rises with just these marks to show it is him. The description of his resurrection, it is the crucified Christ that rose again. The resurrection of Jesus will always be the resurrection of the one who was executed, who died, who was rejected. Till we don't need that sign anymore at the end of time. So Thomas is half right, but it's curious that he uses this argument because he's still thinking in terms of death. That's the way I see Thomas anyway. And Christ said, put your finger here and see my hands, put out your hand, place it at my side. We're never told if he did or not. What we are told is that Thomas answered him by saying, my Lord and my God. In the Irish Church, this can be used as a proclamation of the faith. With other English speaking parts of the church would say, Christ has died, Christ has risen. But you can say, my Lord and my God, this particular practice of the Irish, is the clearest, most unambiguous statement of the divinity of Christ. It's made by Thomas because now he understands that it's not about death, it's about life. Not about the cross. It is about what the cross means, which is when we've lost everything, we can gain everything, that we can never be defeated by evil, that there's no darkness which can extinguish the light forever, because darkness is the mere absence of light. And those who seek darkness will have to run from the light, because the light is with us. Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. That's all the world. Tradition, and I think it's a strong tradition, very plausible tradition, that says that Thomas is the apostle who travels furthest of all the apostles. That he is venerated in India, that he brought the faith to India. It's not at all unlikely because it's well known from archaeological evidence that you could trade between the Roman Empire and certainly the west side of India. There's Roman coins at that period have been found, marks of Roman presence. So certainly not a fanciful myth and no reason to doubt it. I think it's significant that the one who doubted most is also the one who believes most, who stretches out his life to the life of the world to come, through the death of Christ, through the cross. But the cross itself is not the end, it is the beginning.